what what would what is something that you do or things or steps that you take when you're helping someone who is bringing childhood trauma into a relationship?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is for people to get clear on who they are. And I know that sounds so cliche,
Mm,
but one of the things that happens when you grow up in a dysfunctional family is you learn to take on these role selves. And basically, what that is you learned that if I can act a certain way and if I can be a certain way, then I can earn love or at least avoid punishment.
mm,
And when we do that, these role selves, they were survival skills in childhood, but they carry with us into our adult life. And so, if you are a people pleaser, for example, and that's you learned that if I can just be super agreeable, put everyone's needs before my own, and not create conflict, then, I'll be loved. If you bring that into your adult relationship, the person who is dating you or married to you is not actually like in a relationship with you. They're in a
mm,
relationship with your role self. And so one of the first steps is really being able to get clear on, okay, when I take this role self off of me, who am I? Like, what's beneath that? What do I actually think? What do I
mm,
actually feel? And so a lot of our work, when I'm working with clients is like, okay, let's be radically honest with ourselves. What do you actually feel? What do you actually think? And from there, they get to see a little clearer. I find that especially in relationships where both people have a lot of trauma, um, it's really easy to want to just say, oh, we got to just break up or we need to like, leave this relationship. And for some people, that is absolutely the case. But I find that when people are willing to be really honest with themselves, honest
mm.
with each other, and willing to do the hard work, usually we can work something out. That doesn't necessarily happen if you have a relationship with a narcissist, and that's a whole other
Mhm.
topic. Um, but from there, if you're able to be honest, we have a good starting point to learn, okay, how do I know when my partner's being triggered, when they're feeling
Mm,
trauma? And how do I step in and respond to that as a safe person? And one of the things I love about relationships, and this is why I'm a couples therapist, even after all the things I've seen, is that if you are willing to be attentive and attuned to your partner, you can actually be the number one healing medicine for their trauma. Like you can show up
wow.
and actually heal the trauma because its origin was relational. So I love that. That gives me, and I know it's given so many of my clients so much hope because it's like, okay, if we are committed to showing up and doing our work and being really honest with ourselves, and I'm willing to engage my partner with empathy to learn my partner well, then you guys can heal each other. And
Mhm.
yeah, so I love that. And that's kind of the goal when I'm working with clients who have a lot of trauma in their relationship. It's like, okay, can we regulate together and can we be medicine for each other's trauma?
Right. Right,
So,
right. Wow,
yeah.
wow. And that's really good. I like that, being able and really that's what we're supposed to do too, be there
Mhm.
for each other. What
Yeah.
I realized, especially again, just when I was married, a lot of people don't know how to be. They don't know how to
Mhm.
be there for the other person.
Yeah.
They don't know how to show empathy. A lot
Mhm.
of these things sometimes just aren't taught in families.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it reflects as, when we become adults, it reflects.
Mhm.
Like me, I am not a huge touchy-feely person. I like my space. I
Mhm.
I don't wanna
Yeah.
cuddle for too long because then I get hot and I don't wanna be bothered.
Yeah.
So, but for my ex-husband, it was the total opposite. He's
Mhm.
super, super affectionate, but that would cause conflict because I'm like, okay, we could do this for, like 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But after that, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, it's just not, sometimes it's just not being taught. And then, for me, I've
Mhm.
always been like that my whole entire life, which is weird. My mom was super affectionate, my brother, my grandmother, a lot
Mm.
of people, it was just me. I just like, I don't want to touch you. You're in my bubble.
Mm.
You're in my
Hey, you're
bubble.
not the only one.
Mhm.
You
And
are
so,
not
but
the
that
only
was
one.
something, yeah, but it was something that I had to learn to get out of, and it was uncomfortable. It was
Yeah.
uncomfortable because it's like, okay, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like that you're so close. It bothers me, not because anything happened to me as a child, not because I experienced
Mhm.
anything horrific. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like, okay, nope.
Yeah.
I like my space,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
so it is one of those things that you have to learn, especially when you are married or you're in a serious relationship with someone that is your partner, your person.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think, just hearing you being able to say, like, "That's not me," like, "I don't like that,
Right.
and here's my boundary, like, I can do 5 minutes, but I can't just do this forever." I think, like, another crucial element is, like, can your partner respect your boundary? Like, can
Oh
they
yeah.
respect that you are who you are and allow you to walk this earth as the person you are instead of trying to change you? So, yeah, I think you were exercising a boundary, and it sounded like a
Yeah.
lot of the conflict was in that boundary not being respected.
Being respected. Yeah. Oh girl, look.
Mhm.
if we if we went on about my marriage, we'd be here all night. We
Oh
would be
yeah,
here
we'd be
all
here.
night.
It'd be a few days, not even all night, a few days.
9 years is a lot of stories to tell. And
Now
so,
I
go
have a
ahead. I'm sorry.
question.
Yeah.
Oh, you're fine. I have a question. So I'm not married, so I'm the single one here. But why do people, I guess, compare or say that they want, like, for people who have parents or grandparents that's been married for several years, why do sometimes they, I guess, compare their relationship or want to compare their relationship like their parents or their grandparents? Because I am very guilty of this, because I always
Mm,
say I want a marriage like my grandparents, because they were married for 30 years before my grandfather passed away. And he like never
mhm,
raised his voice at her. She never raised her voice at him. Never, called her out of her name. But they were like so loving and sweet. I didn't even think they ever argued because they were just too cute.
mm, mm,
And and I've always said, like, I want a relationship like that, and I know that's really not ideal because I'm not them, but why do
yeah.
people, I guess, like, try to compare whatever relationships that they want to their parents or their grandparents?
Mm. Gosh, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this, if I'm being totally honest. My my first thought, though, is that, things that are familiar feel safe. And so, if you are familiar with their relationship and you've seen it as you were growing up and it seemed like such a warm, comforting place, then it feels safe to replicate that. Whereas, if you're dating somebody who is very different from that, maybe they are very expressive and not, as docile, and um, that could feel scary and threatening because it's not familiar and it's new territory. Um, but yeah, I haven't really thought about that in a lot of detail, if I'm being honest. Those are just some initial thoughts. Yeah.
Oh no, you're fine. I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and that is true, Unique. A lot of people now, especially like you hear stuff like what they say, relationship goals and things like that, and they want to
Mhm.
try to replicate what someone else have, but
Yeah.
relationships, marriages, that is not easy. It's not easy. And all we
No.
know is what people allow us to see. There are always
Yeah.
things that are that's happening on the back end, that we just don't see or that people do not put out. They just simply don't
Yeah.
put out. I say, but a lot of people, they do look up to different relationships, whether if it's family, like you said, grandmother and and granddad, or even
Mhm.
celebrities, and say, okay, I want that because they have a feeling
Mhm.
or a thought that that is what a relationship or a marriage is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Forgetting that the struggles that come with it are very real.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love the phrase, "The grass is always greener because it's fake." I
Mhm,
love
Mhm.
that phrase because, what we see is what exactly what you said, like, is what people show, and there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. I mean, as a
mhm,
couples therapist, gosh, I often feel imposter syndrome because my husband and I will have issues, and meanwhile, I'm here, like, talking to, clients about their relationship, and, um, there's so much that happens, and you could still have a quality relationship and have conflicts, and
mhm.
but
Yes,
people don't wanna
absolutely.
talk about it, and they don't wanna show it because our culture has decided that conflict equals bad. And I think, this whole dichotomy of good and bad is problematic in itself. But, I think that as a couples therapist, when I hear that a couple doesn't fight, that's usually a red flag for me.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
because I want people to be aggressive, but because if you're not fighting, you're either not talking or you're not being real with each other because you're
Mm.
different people. Um, but yeah, I'm going off on a tangent. But I would just say that,
I totally
like,
agree with that. I
yeah, people
totally
do
agree
hide
with that
things.
completely. Completely. A lot of
Mhm.
people do hide things. A lot of people people change. We change
Yeah.
all the time. We change all the time. And so, who you married, 5, 6, 7, 20 years ago, however, they change. They're not that person
Mhm.
that you married. It's an evolving thing. It's like it's it's just as we're
Yeah.
always evolving, we're always doing something different. And sometimes what I realize, since you brought that up, is when we do change, our partner might not like the way and which way that we're
Mhm.
changing or who we're becoming.
Yeah.
And because of that, and because, like I said, just the different changes and things that happen with life, there's also a lot of things in life that we're going to go through that we're just simply not prepared for. And so, how you
Yeah.
can be married or with someone for however long and not argue is, like you said, there's something that is horribly wrong, just based off of the fact of how much we do change as people. And so
Mhm.
something is very, very wrong, if you're not arguing, you're just not being real with each other, you're not being honest, and maybe you just want to make it seem like everything is perfect. A lot of people like the idea of marriage, so they
Mhm. Mhm.
will make believe
Yes.
like everything. They'll play house, right? They'll
Yeah.
play house
Yeah.
and they'll want to look good in front of other people, but then when it actually comes to being real and honest with each other, it's almost like something stops them. Something blocks them from
Mhm.
being able to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
do you feel like it is or isn't okay to not introduce your partner to your family? Mhm.
Hmm. I think, I think that it really depends on like the stage of the relationship and um what kind of family you have too. Like if you have a family that you don't feel safe with, like do you want to expose them to your family at the get-go? But I think it does depend on like, okay, what stage do you feel comfortable with? And I don't think there is a right or wrong. Some couples will meet their families right at the start, and for others, it's like, no, I need to know that we're very serious before we do that. So,
But,
I think it
but
I think
but
it
what if
depends
they
on like
never
cultural
want
norms of the
them?
family.
What if
If
they
they
never
never
want
want
them
them
to
to
meet
meet,
their family? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, it's like, what's what's the motivation for that? Like if it's really about like, okay, like my family's not safe people for me and they wouldn't be safe people for our relationship. Our relationship would be um yeah, it would be made vulnerable if they were exposed to our family, then that makes sense. And I think that's valid. Um,
That makes sense,
so,
especially if the family comes from like a is more toxic and maybe they're
mhm,
harmful in some ways. That
uh,
makes sense if you want to keep your person, your partner away from, like, nah, I don't think it's time that you meet my family. That makes perfect sense. But I
yeah.
guess unique with the way that you phrase and ask the question, do you mean like if you're talking to someone and they just don't want to meet your family or be
No,
bothered
I
with
don't
that at
want
all?
them to meet. No, I don't want them to meet my family.
Oh,
That would
you
be the
don't want
thing.
them to meet.
Mm,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see.
mm,
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Again, like I said, if you know that your family, or even if it's their family, is really toxic, then that would make sense. Why you're like, yeah, no, we're gonna
mhm.
stay away from we're gonna stay away from them and not be bothered.
Yeah. And I think
Ye-
it's important to explain to your partner and to like be on the same page about it because, some people might be like, oh, are they ashamed of me? Or, you
Mhm.
know, are they seeing somebody else at the same time? Like things like that could come up in their minds. But if you're like, no, like for the safety of our relationship and because I care about you, I don't feel comfortable with you meeting my family. That's a totally different thing. Like that's a very loving thing to
Mm.
communicate.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. I think it is too. I mean, at least like they know, because like assumptions can go a very long way, and
Yes.
sometimes we assume things, and our mind just goes with it, and next thing we know, we have all these different scenarios and things that we've come up with in our mind.
Mhm.
I always tell people I will never leave you room to assume anything because I'm always going to tell you exactly what's on my mind, how I feel. Now, what you take with that, whether or not if you believe me, is something you have to figure out. But I'm
Right.
going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you. And in relationships, like you said, it's important that you do let them know, okay, this is why I don't want you to meet
Mm.
my family. I understand why
Yeah.
some people still may want to, just because they're like, okay, I want to know who you are, where you come from, things like that. But if you have a good reason on why you just don't want that to happen, why you don't want them to meet your family, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think that, the way that your partner responds to your request for them to not meet your family will also be very telling. Like, are they somebody who can respect you and your boundaries? Are they somebody who's willing to trust you when you say, like, this isn't good for us or for me? Um, so it can be very telling as well to see how do they respond to that. So,
Mm. Right. And
mhm,
so I have a question. Have you
yeah.
have you had to have you had to help people who are more childlike in their marriages or relationships? If that makes sense. Like they kind of want their partner
Yeah.
to be the
Their
parent
mom.
rather than, well, and
Yeah.
it can go both ways because women do it
Yeah.
too. Women do it too.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
where they've wanted their partner to be the parent instead of
Mhm.
a their partner, their husband or their wife or whatever it is. Have you ever had to deal with anyone who I guess who was just stuck in a childlike mind?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually really common. And a reason for that is because our trauma is trying to work itself out. And so we project, say you had a really toxic or abusive mom, we project that onto our partners um, and try to have them fill that hole in us that our mom or whoever else was supposed to actually fill. So it's a way that our trauma, our minds are trying to work themselves out and heal without us really being conscious about it. Um,
Mm,
Hopefully, through therapy, that's something that can come up and we can work through it and, you know, be like, okay, what are partner expectations versus parent-child expectations. Like, how do these relationships differ, and how do we give you a space to experience healthy relationships through your partner instead of, just being stuck in the past trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled, and now it's up to you to fill for yourself. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is that I find this a lot in people who have a more anxious attachment style, or um, who are really like trying to pursue their partner to get a need met. They'll
Mm.
often be the ones who are, looking for their partner to fill that need. And it's hard because you have to, at some point, grieve the fact that you didn't get your needs met as a kid,
Mhm.
and now you have to be that person to reparent yourself. You are the only person who can give yourself that unconditional love, that unconditional acceptance, and be able to say to yourself, like, we're okay. Like, I'm not going to abandon you. You've been abandoned before, but I'm with you and I'm not going anywhere. Instead of looking to your partner to be this ideal parent figure that you never had. So that's, yeah, that's a really common dynamic.
That does happen. Okay, so Brittany says, but when they refuse to explain why not, when they are comfortable enough to come over to your front door for your partner. So I think what she means is when you refuse to explain why you can't meet their family, is what that sounds like.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about the family
Yeah.
when you're trying to meet your family. Okay. Um, so sorry, I'm just trying to
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
look at this again. So when they're not, so Brittany, I think what you're saying is, like, if they are not accepting the fact that you have this boundary and you don't want them to meet your family, is that what you read?
What I think might be saying is that maybe if she wanted to meet the family and they were refusing to explain why you can't
Oh,
meet their
okay.
family is what that may sound like. So yeah, what do you do with
Yeah.
that? You have someone that you're
Yeah.
with, you've been dating, and they just refuse
Mhm.
to give you an explanation on why you can't meet my family, why I don't want you to be involved with my family.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. And I mean, I don't know that person, or, the
Right.
background of that relationship. So it's hard to say, but, it seems like there's a trust issue there of, like, not being willing to give an explanation, or maybe there's even something deeper there of, like, I
That we
don't
don't
want to
know.
be forced
Right.
to share something I said I don't feel comfortable with. So there's so many different dynamics, but, at the end of the day, like, we do have to respect our partner's boundaries. But if there's something that makes you feel unsafe and you don't feel comfortable with it, then that leads to a bigger conversation of, okay, is this somebody I can be in a relationship with? And that's super challenging to have to face that
Yeah.
question. But, I think that trust and being able to act as a team is really important for relationships. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I completely agree with that. Being able to act as a team, being able to just talk and actually
Mhm.
communicate those feelings and things with each other again, especially because, like you said, there would have to be a bigger issue, a bigger problem with, okay, why are you refusing to allow me, to meet your family or to,
Mhm.
to know that side or that part of you. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, it really is so many different areas, so many things that that it could be
Yeah.
where you really just can't give a solid pinpoint answer on that.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for that, Brittany. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so back to the people who deal, I guess, with this childlike syndrome when they are married. Do you find it where it's more common in men or women who deal with this?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't make a generalization about that. I've seen it in both across the board, and I think ultimately it just comes down to, like, if you didn't get your needs met by your parent as a kid, it's probably gonna come up in your relationship.
Right.
So,
Right. And I
Yeah.
could totally agree with that. I know for me, like I said,
Yeah.
my mother was there, my grandmother was there, but my dad,
Mhm.
he was not there. And so I completely
Mm.
understand because when me personally, when I got married, I expected so much from my husband that it
Yeah.
was just so unrealistic. It was so
Yeah.
unrealistic. I had put him on this pedestal and the expectations that I had for him. He tried
Mhm.
to meet, he did try to meet, but that also caused stress and that caused strain within our marriage because he did try, but then when he couldn't, he would get frustrated with me, he would get frustrated with himself, and then that just unfortunately brought on many other issues. That brought on
Mhm.
many other issues. It's just kind of like a domino effect.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
domino effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because, like, in the therapy world, we call that a healing fantasy. And
Mhm.
that's another survival skill that we learn as kids is, to have it helps us hold on to hope. Like, if only this person could act this way, then I'll feel loved, I'll feel safe,
Mhm.
I'll feel cared for. And we bring those into our adult relationships and we place these huge idealistic expectations on people, and those keep us from healing because we're not able to get in touch with reality, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it keeps us from having real connection too. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of the healing process is being able to recognize, like, yeah, I'm holding on to a fantasy right now and I'm not able to really grasp reality as it is and be okay with that.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that because going back to what you said about, having to, you're going to have to heal yourself. You're going to have to go through that. You're going to have to go through that grieving process. That's something that's not, those are
Mhm.
not steps that you can just simply miss. You have
Yeah.
to go through those things. It's a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I definitely agree with you, totally on that. You have to go through those because if you don't, it'll just, like I said, continue to just spiral. It'll spiral
Mhm.
out of control. And it'll cause, like I said, more strain and more stress on your relationship.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
literally affects one thing after the next, after the next, after the next, because of
Mhm.
this fantasy, this idea that you have for your partner. You want them to be this for you. You want them to, to meet this expectation, forgetting that they are too just human.
Yeah.
And not only are they not human, but they're not responsible for what you went through
Right.
with the family trauma.
Mhm. Right. Yeah,
Right.
they're not responsible for healing that. They can choose to be a part of that healing, but we
Right.
can't force them to be that for us. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so what do you do with you have someone who is healing and wanting to go through this process of healing and, you know, just being recovering from their past, whatever it is that they've been through that may be,
Mhm.
reflecting onto their relationship. Now, what do you do if they have a partner or a spouse who is just not um accepting of that? They're not, they like them the way that they are. They like that they can depend on
Mhm.
them or that they want, they want them
Yeah.
they want them to need them for everything, if that makes sense. What do you do with the person, like I said, who's going through that healing, but then their
Mhm.
partner is just not for it?
Yeah, that is such a hard dynamic to be in because, often when you go through a healing process, it really requires that things change around you and the people around you can adapt to that
Mhm,
healing. And if you are in a relationship that is dysfunctional, it probably worked enough when you were still not healing and you were still living in these survival skills and dysfunctional habits. But once you start healing, they're not going to want you to become this whole
mhm,
confident person who has boundaries. Boundaries feel so threatening to people who are used to that dependency and these dysfunctional behaviors. So Yeah, as a therapist, what I do is really like have them kind of paint a picture of like, okay, if we continue down this road, like what will life look like?
Mhm.
If we were to start adapting, like what good things can come of it? Like, yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable to not have somebody need you all the time,
Mhm.
but what can you fill that space with now that they're not needing you? How can two whole people now co-create in their relationship? And so kind of just starting to like build that motivation, paint a different picture that this isn't just loss, it's also an opportunity for you guys to move forward in a really beautiful way. Um, if it gets to the point where that partner is making it almost impossible for you to keep healing because they are putting you down or they're blaming you for things or, you know, just like making it so that you don't feel emotionally safe, then again, that's where we get to that really hard conversation of, is this a relationship you guys want? Like,
Right.
if
Right.
you can't be healthy and whole in this relationship, then why do you want this relationship? Like, what is worth fighting for in it? So that's a hard conversation that most people don't want to have. And, you know, hopefully we can get to a place instead where there is this motivation for the other person to heal. Because often if one person heals, the other is either going to leave or they're going to heal too. And so
Right. Right.
we hope that it'll be a catalyst for their healing, but we don't know. It
We don't
depends
know.
on